Week 15 is here right now, and here's a few kickers that can help you possibly win your game and move on to the championship. The first kicker sleeper is Cody Parkey of the Cleveland Browns. Last week, Parkey, he had a bad ball game for the Browns, but before that, he was putting up some good fantasy numbers. In Week 12 versus Jacksonville, he had 9 fantasy points. Week 13, 11. And last week, though, was the bad game versus Baltimore with only 2 fantasy points. But this week, he's got a good matchup versus the New York Giants is Parkey that give up the 10th most fantasy points to kickers. And Parkey, I could see this game where this one is a low-scoring type of battle in the low teens, high 20s in this one, where there's going to be 3 or 4 field goal attempts. Both defenses are pretty good. Last week, the Brown defense, it was just a chaotic game where it caused a shootout. But I think Cody Parkey, he could have opportunities, and he could possibly get double-digit fantasy points, and he's a kicker available in 99% of leagues. The second kicker I like as a sleeper this week's Gano, as we're staying in the same game. Gano, he was on a decent stretch for a few weeks with double-digit fantasy points, but the last 2 weeks, it's been struggles for Gano now. But now the Giants are back home, and maybe Gano, he could get things kicked back into gear. Last week, he only had an extra point made, and that was it, because the Giants only scored 7 points. But here versus Cleveland, I think it's going to be a decent battle. There's going to be opportunities for both kickers, and that's why I think they're both sleepers in this game. And Gano, we've seen him have good games this season, so he's the second sleeper, and he's available in 93% of fantasy leagues. And the third and final kicker option that could be a sleeper and help your team this week's Aldrick Rojas, a former Giant, now the kicker with the Jacksonville Jaguars. And Rojas, he's been up and down from the practice squad this season, but in the 2 games he's played for the Jaguars, in Week 12 he had a 53-yarder and a 27-yarder and an extra point, and then in Week 14 he was kicking with a 53-yarder and a PAT. So this kicker's good. I know he got into some legal trouble, but he's got a good boot, and he made the Pro Bowl last season or 2 years ago, whatever it was, with the New York Giants. So you know he's got potential. He could kick a far field goal or 2 in this game. And versus Baltimore, I think Jacksonville is going to have to settle for a lot of those. So that's 3 kickers that are sleepers this week heading into Week 15.